In this episode, we'll be reviewing Koi from Smirk and Laughter Games.
So koi, the basic premise is that you are playing koi fish. You're swimming around in a pond and you're trying to eat dragonflies and frogs, which are worth points, avoiding rocks, getting scared by falling petals, all that stuff.
So something I really liked about this, and I think is interesting, is that it has a single-player mode. Now, you've played that, and you liked it pretty well.
Yeah, so in the single player, you draw cards randomly you're essentially playing the board. There's one other fish, and you draw cards randomly for that fish. And it has pretty good explanation in the rules of how you handle the different movements, and what the other fish does based off of what cards you draw.
Yeah, and I know we've been looking more at two-player and single-player games, or games that have that component, and I've seen some folks complaining, or they don't like criticizing, sort of in the online forums, about games that give you those options, but then you have to have a ghost player, someone has to play the board. So if that bothers you, then know that you need to do that for Koi. Although, I mean, honestly, I don't know how you play a one-player board game like that and not have to be playing the board as well. I haven't played any games that you don't have to do that. If you have, that's awesome. Let us know what some of those are in the comments below. But it seems like it works pretty well with Koi.
Yeah, and it doesn't change too much from the 2 to 4 player play style. There's the board fish, which is just what I'm going to call it, moves a little bit more randomly because you're not sitting there strategizing. But it's still, there were several times that fish ended up eating a dragonfly that I was hoping to get. So in that aspect, or suddenly there was a rock in front of my fish and I couldn't swim forward. That kind of thing.
The rules are pretty simple, and maybe we can do a how to play someday later. But basically, what it is you have your fish, and you have cards. You read the cards from the bottom up. Now, that might take a little bit of getting used to, but the bottom of the card has a little fish on it. So remember, you always start at your fish. Solid black symbols you have to do. Blue symbols are optional. So you either can turn or move forward or jump. And then from there, you're placing rocks or placing petals that fall and cause ripples, placing dragonflies or placing frogs. There's a weather mechanic that's pretty neat.
Yeah, so that each time you play, you draw a certain number of weather cards, and that also tells you how many days you play. And then that introduces, and I like that it introduces it in the second day. The first day is just you move around like normal. But then it adds a little bit of randomness, and you have far more weather cards in the box than you ever play with in a single game, so that adds a really nice, each game is going to be a little different because of those weather cards and the changing and the additional rules or changes to rules that they introduce.
And it might be things like the pond floods, which scares all the frogs away and pushes the fish to the edge of the pond. Or there's a strong breeze that comes from a certain direction and all of the dragonflies and petals then move in that direction. They're pretty neat. We've talked about before, I don't like games that are centered around the idea of screwing over the other players, and Koi finds a really good balance. I mean, yeah, I want to eat more dragonflies and frogs than you. And in one of our games, I dropped a rock in front of Dawn's fish to try to keep her from getting a dragonfly. It ended up not working.
Because I had a jump card.
Yeah, she was able to, hop out of the water and jump over the rock and still get the thing. But the game doesn't revolve around that. I think most of our game, we just kind of ignored each other and we're doing our own thing. So I like that there are options as far as playstyle goes.
Yeah, and you can do things like bump into other fish or drop a paddle that might move a fish. But I think, at least the way we were playing, it seemed to be a lot of, well, I'm doing this because this is what is going to get me the most, versus I'm doing this to prevent the other player from getting something.
Absolutely have to talk about how beautiful the game is. The art style is great. The box just looks really pretty on your shelf.
And the art style fits the game completely. And I love how the little fish pieces, the color choices they made for the Koi, And the fact that they're like not just a straight fish, but the like slight curve. Although sometimes that gets a little confusing, keeping track of which hex side the fish are facing, because that's important for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. The direction that your fish or the frog is facing is important to the rules, and that sometimes is easy to lose track of, or just forget, or because of the curve of the fish, which I really like, makes it a little less obvious. Look, I wouldn't want them to straighten the fish piece out or put an arrow on it or something like that. It's just something to keep in mind. You've played it solo, we've played it together, and then we have played a 4-person game, and they all seem pretty similar and balanced.
And I also like that the game mentions, and we played this way when we were playing the 4-player, just because we were running out of time that game night, that you can have a shorter game by just having less days.
Yeah.
Like, I think we ended up doing 4 days instead of the full 7 days.
Which, the 7 days seems to really go by pretty quickly, and I don't know how you would lengthen the game, honestly, without just trying to play for more days or anything like that. So, it's a pretty quick game, but it's not really a game I would play back to back.
No.
Not because it's not fun. I do enjoy this game, but there's a few other games that we have that we've played, we finished, and then we've turned right around and played another round of it.
I think there's not as much going on with this game, so once you've gone through and played 7 rounds of it, it's kind of like, well, do I really want to play 7 rounds of playing cards and moving things around the board? And there is some strategy to it. Definitely the order you play the cards in, and you can also choose to discard and redraw.
Sure, sure.
But it's also the randomness of what cards I end up with, as well as what do the other players end up doing.
It's a fairly simple game, and I mean that as a compliment, but it perhaps isn't enough to engage you for 2 or 3 plays in a row. I think it's probably great for people that are sort of new to this style of board game, or for kids.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it a kids game.
So we would highly recommend picking this game up and adding it to your board game library at home. We want to give a thanks to all of our patrons, especially Sean, Joan, Arvie, Lainey, and Bryce.
If you'd like to become one of our patrons, have it be easier for us to have even more games to review and do how-tos and things like that, then check us out over at patreon.com/rollforinitiative and find a tier that's right for you. That would be really awesome. But until next time, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Dawn.
And this is Roll for Initiative. Bye. We're having puppy technical issues.